The man was clutching her by the forearm, and only let go as Annabel came through the door. Drusilla Gobblestone has received an invite to a rather mysterious school, a school from which children are disappearing. Children like Annabel Merriweather. The many descendants of the Salem witches, the Palmati and Merriweather family, were some of the finest. This fact was drilled into Annabel Merriweather from the time she was 3 years old. As it was, Anastasia Palmati, Annabel's mother, was doubly blessed with a Native American witch for a mother and an Italian Palmati warlock for a father. And Annabel's father, Martin Merriweather, was a powerhouse warlock in his own right, while, to the untrained eye, Martin seemed like your perfectly average mailman. He was anything but. In fact, if you asked the residents of Blessings Hollow if any of them had seen him delivering mail directly into their mailbox, not a one of them could say yes. This was because when Martin floated upside down from mailbox to mailbox, nobody ever saw him, as he had mastered camouflage to the point of being invisible. Many in the witching community knew that Martin came from a long line of powerful witches. His mother was pure Salem. Most witches were soul sharers, or so Annabel's parents had told her. That meant when a witch or warlock died, they stashed a tiny part of their soul in the younger generation. This was referred to as a maga, and Martin was a beneficiary of years of practice. As it was, he was a direct descendant of the powerful Silence Goodwill. Silence had been one of a handful of Salem witches who had escaped persecution. Unlike the witches who were brutally murdered at the hands of their fellow colonialists, she fled Salem for a blissful life in Albany. There she became an alchemist, one who could cure acne and flatulence simply by mixing a tonic into the town well. She practiced maga, and her daughter did the same, and her granddaughter Tatiana also did as well. On and on it went, knowledge of spells, curses, hexes, etc., passing from generation to generation as the witches stashed bits of their souls in the younger generation, until it reached Martin and subsequently his darling daughter Annabel. Unfortunately, Annabel found that having two parents with such fine witching heritage was a burden. There were great expectations among the witching society about what a Palmati Merriweather offspring might be able to do. These fine people who speculated on Annabel's powers would not have believed that the heir to so powerful a family as the Merriweathers would fall prey to a most hideous evil. Yet that was precisely what had happened. And not only did the witching community not know, Annabel's mother and father did not know either. Martin remained blissfully unaware as he floated down Elm Street stuffing mailboxes. Anastasia Merriweather was so lost in recreating miniaturized naval battles in her kitchen sink that she did not have the faintest idea of her daughter's immediate peril. In fact, Annabel herself didn't yet understand her predicament, but was beginning to dawn on her. At that very moment, her eyelids fluttered open, and she attempted to adjust to a strong light. To her alarm, her vision seemed impaired. The entire space around her was blurry. Where was she? For the life of her, she couldn't remember. With a sense of urgency, she tried to sit up, but found she couldn't move. She tried something less ambitious and wiggled her fingers on her right hand. It was only then that she noticed her surroundings. There was a constant rocking motion, and she was reminded of her cousin Titus's invention of a mechanical swaying bed. Was she at home in New Hampshire? Was this Titus's bed? Were her mother and aunt cooking cabbage in a cauldron over the stove in the kitchen? She sniffed the air, which smelled of salt and fish. These were her first clues that she was on a boat. But how did she get here? The last thing she had been doing was singing on the school stage at Mrs. Morris's. No, wait, that wasn't the last thing she remembered. If she thought about it, she could remember that after practicing for the upcoming talent show, she had partaken in the first rugby match of the year. She had mowed down the boys from Brookhaven, wusses that they were. She hated touching other people who knew what you could catch, but rugby necessitated contact. The thoughts of mowing down the Brookhaven boys caused the corners of her mouth to turn upward, but her smile soon faded. There was no doubt about it. The room was rocking back and forth. Outside she could hear waves. Light was flooding in from a porthole. Something was wrong. Annabelle's family didn't do boats or water. Several members of the Merryweathers had been dumped during post-Salem witch trials. Annabelle's very own great-great-grandmother Tatiana had become so traumatized by repeated dunking that she stopped taking baths. Rumor had it that Tatiana's husband, Titmore, had to sneak up and douse her once a week to keep her from becoming overly smelly. Unfortunately, this strong hatred of water rolled down from generation to generation until it stopped with Annabelle. She was fine with showering, thank you very much. In fact, she showered 3 or 4 times a day. The boat hit a swell and rocked to the right. Annabelle almost fell off the cot. Think. How did I get here? Annabelle wondered. For that matter, where exactly was here? Was she on a great lake, or, Freya forbid, the Atlantic? Annabelle remembered receiving a note. It had been from Professor Cuckleburn. Inside it read, "My dearest Annabelle, your singing is most excellent. Please meet me under the bleachers on the rugby field at noon, and we can discuss your place in the show. Yours, Occultia Cuckleburn." It seemed strange that the choir teacher would send such a missive, but then again Cuckleburn had been acting rather jumpy and out of sorts since school had restarted. Case in point, a week prior, Annabelle had entered the music room to find the professor talking to a giant of a man dressed in a navy peacoat. The man was clutching her by the forearm, and only let go as Annabelle came through the door. Cuckleburn appeared frightened for a moment before turning red with embarrassment. For his part, the man swept past Annabelle angrily, pulling his scarf around his scarred face as he left. What was the man doing here in a girls' school? Up until that point, the only men Annabelle had seen inside the school had been the delivery driver who brought the produce to the kitchens and the night watchman, Alamander Eventide. Even the fathers of the very fine girls who attended the school were required to leave their offspring on the front door and proceed no further. Is everything all right?" Annabelle asked Cuckleburn after the man hurried off. In response, Cuckleburn turned a brighter shade of red. "Mind your own," she snapped. This was such uncharacteristic behavior on behalf of the kind music teacher that Annabelle took a quick step backwards and stumbled over a roaming ermine. The conversation ended as the other students flooded through the doorway, plopping down on piano benches and commencing with the prerequisite scales. Annabelle sat down stiffly on her bench. She pulled a dampened cloth from her book bag and wiped each key. The rest of the class progressed as normal. After a rousing song of Dinah, Annabelle forgot all about the incident. Then, a week later, the note came. Was Professor Cuckleburn going to tell her the identity of the man in the navy coat? Was the teacher in some sort of trouble that she wanted to confess? Or did the professor really want to discuss her singing in the talent show? But why would they need to meet underneath the bleachers at the rugby field? She had hurried, sweaty and hot, to the agreed-upon meeting place at the agreed-upon time. The match had ended 20 minutes earlier, and everyone had exited the fields. When Annabel reached the Bleachers, she hesitated. It wasn't the black widows who lived there that frightened her, but the wadded-up chewing gum that littered the underside of the risers. Annabel had to summon an inner courage before ducking underneath. A woman was there. Professor Cuckleburn? She was wrapped in a cloak with the hood pulled tight so that her face was in shadow. "Professor, I'm sorry I'm late. We were just doing our winner's cheer in the locker room. It's much better than the piteous wail Coach Malice requires we perform when we lose a match. I'm not able to wail like a banshee. It just doesn't come naturally." Cuckleburn didn't reply. Something was off. There wasn't time to give it much thought, because a moment later, Annabel grew lightheaded and dizzy. Now, here she was, lying on a cot, staring out a porthole at a sail. And soon, Annabel would realize exactly what was happening to her.